Hello and welcome to Diaspora Weekly Conversations. This is where we hold the serious conversations and we'll get through all the hype and just get down to business. You know, Africa or people of African descent are now the majority. Actually, not the majority, they outnumber any group of people on the planet. On the continent, the population is about 1.3 billion. And outside Africa, you have another 200 million. That makes people of Africa all over the world 1.5 billion. China is the closest at 1.4 billion, India 1.38 billion. So people of African descent are really more than anybody. And yet, it is fair to say that we have the most struggles. And the continent is not monolithic, has 55 different countries, but then you have 200 million people who reside outside the continent. They come from all over the place. And so now the conversation has started that if I do my ancestry DNA, if I'm black and I live in Colombia, Suriname, United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, if I do my ancestry DNA and it brings to fore that, for example, I am 23% Ghanaian, 19% Cameroonian, 10% Kenyan, I should have a pathway to citizenship to one of those countries. I had a conversation with 3 people in Atlanta. I want you to listen close to it because they are now raising a whole new set of issues that can open up some pretty emotional discussion. In addition to the pathway to citizenship, now they are even raising the potential of reparations. And who should pay the reparations? Well, most of the time when reparations have been discussed, it's been centered on those who committed the slavery atrocities. But listen to these individuals. They say those who actually sold the slaves also should pay reparation. Where do you stand on that? And this is where I want you to pay attention to this upcoming conversation. So here's the question. It's been suggested that Africans in the diaspora, African Americans, Caribbean, UK, and all that, who might not have been born on the continent, when they do their DNA, 23andMe, and all those ancestry DNA, and it returns that maybe you, Daryl, your DNA is in Angola, Gala, maybe your DNA is in Ghana, then armed with that DNA test, there should be a pathway for you to obtain citizenship of that country. What do you guys feel about
that? Absolutely. We've done it. I've taken 3 tests for 23andMe, AfricanAncestry.com, and AfricanAncestry.com. So Daryl and I have taken that test, and we both are Mindy from Sierra Leone. For me, it's on my mother's side. But on the other test, it does show that I have Nigerian and Ghanaian and Cameroonian, in my DNA. So absolutely, we're open to dual citizenship.
Yeah. Okay, so let me touch on that a little bit. In this case, if a law was being formulated, would you support? I'm asking you to answer from the perspective of the African government, but here's a question. Since yours show Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, should you be allowed to pick and choose, or should you be limited to the dominant one? Which was the dominant one to start with yours? Because I think it gives percentages, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it gives percentages. So the country with a higher percentage should be the one that you're limited to, or should it be like, hey, since I'm Ghanaian, Nigerian, Sierra Leone, I should be able to apply for one, and once I apply for that one, I forfeit the rest. What's your take on those?
No, I don't think so. That's my opinion. Because on most of mine it shows a higher percentage of Nigerian. But I would love to be able to apply for Ghana or Sierra Leone, or I mean for multiple ones, because that's we are a melting pot of Africa. That's what African Americans are. And that's what the continent of Africa needs to be, a melting pot. So that we had this, Daryl and I had this whole conversation that if Africa looked like an African American, that Africa then could rise up, because we have a little bit of everything. And so we have no real loyalty to tribalism or even to the boundaries that separate country to country. Of course, we say Africa, and yes, we know it's a continent, and that's where we're from. But we be open to having citizenship in any of them. And I have talked to the madam, I'll think of her name in a minute, but she's there in Ghana, and she's helping to write legislation. I got her in contact with Louis Gates Jr., the Harvard professor, so that he could give a clear definition of, who the African Americans are and how to identify them for citizenship in Ghana.
Okay, Daryl?
I would like to, I'm going to say it like this. Many of us, before colonization, our
You're frozen, Daryl.
ancestors were taken from Africa.
Daryl, repeat. You're frozen.
Before colonization, okay, yeah, before colonization, many of us were taken from Africa, ancestry before colonization, when there was tribes and there were people, but there was no boundary lines. There was no boundary lines originally in the land that they now call Africa. When many of our ancestors were taken. So we shouldn't have boundary lines now. In our perspective, we look at it as if we would like to relationship with all of our people. We're not divided within ourselves. So for us to have citizenship, we would like to have citizenship with each of them in relationship, because they have boundaries. But we didn't have boundaries, that relationship. So if you look at the ancient map of Africa, where they had various people and groups, they didn't have these same boundary lines that were created by the colonizers. So the colonizers came and did that to our land. We are against that type of mindset. We like the free trade between countries. And if we come together as a people, Black people, and we come together, we will rise up. We look forward to the day. You hear many people say, we know that Africa is a continent, not a country. But when he say, don't come down too hard on the uneducated one that says Africa like it's a country, because in mindset, they may be thinking toward the future, to one day where there will be an African leader, a president possibly, of Africa.
Yeah.
A relationship where there's one Africa created, and where people can work together. And at that point in time, we'll be back where we are the architects of humanity, will rule the world.
Okay. So now here, I know you guys are for the pathway to citizenship. So what's in contention here is, should you have pathway to all of them, all of the countries listed on your DNA, or should you be limited to choosing one? Or here's a third option. The African Union has what it calls the sixth region, because the 5 regions of Africa, West Africa, Northern Africa, Central Africa, Eastern Africa, and Southern Africa. That's 5. And now, officially, the African Union has the 6th region, which is Africans in the diaspora. All right. that's not a country, so there's not a citizenship per se. Should that be thrown in the mix such that rather than say giving you, okay, you can, you Gal, in the case of Gala, you're an American citizen, but now you can tag on Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Ghana as they show on your DNA test, which I know some people will say, whoa, 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 I'm a Ghanaian, I'm born on the soil, and I'm limited to one. How do you come in from the diaspora and now you can pick and choose all three of them? Or, and so I guess the option that I'm asking, putting on the table for your take on is this. Option one, should you be forced to choose one of the many or the dominant one that's on your DNA? Option two, should you be allowed to choose all citizenship? And then option three, should we develop the sixth region such that that will solve the problem of having to choose one or many countries? You're just from that sixth region, and that citizenship is as good as a Ghanaian or Angolan or Nigerian citizenship. Where do you stand on those three options?
Well, my thoughts are with option one, it's like choosing between my mom and my dad. And I
Okay.
don't want to choose. If my dad has more Nigerian and my mom has more Sierra Leone, I want to be citizens of both.
Okay.
Option two, yes, I mean, it would be, I do understand what continental Africans, how they would resist that because, they have many parents that have, are from different ethnic areas as well. And then option three, I did listen to Dr. Arcana Shaburqua's recent interview where she's talked about the sixth region and the fact that we don't really have a governance structure yet in place for that. And that's why she's hosting that meeting in October. I think that's down the road. That could be part two. But to get to citizenship immediately, I would think that option two works best for me. I would like to be able to choose all three if that's what I want. Because I do have the DNA evidence. I have, have it in triplica to show where my family comes from. But yes, having option three would be wonderful, but it may not even be in our lifetime.
Okay. Okay. What about you, Daryl?
I agree with Gayla, and I'll add this. I do feel that I understand while someone who was born uh, African in Africa would have to say, well, that's not fair. Well, but you have to look at the history of how we arrived or how we have so many different groups. It wasn't by choice. It was generally because of chattel slavery. Our ancestors paid the price for us to have this choice. We lost connection with our families, not intentionally, not because we wanted to. It wasn't our history, it was an interruption in our history. It was an interruption in it. That interruption disconnected me from the same people that are born in Africa. And think of it this way. If I was your brother, I'm your brother, and I was taken into chattel slavery, how would you feel about it? And I have on all the different lands, how do you feel about me coming back? Do you want me to be a Ghanaian? Do you want me to be Sierra Leone? With my brother in Sierra Leone, do you want me to be your brother? Or do you want me to choose? Do I have another brother who's in Angola? Which choice do you want me to take? Which brother you want me to choose?
Okay. All right.
That's how I look at
it. Okay. Well, the second question on this matter is, would you rather the African Union lead this effort? I know the African Union Commission does not have the power to mandate the member countries to enact laws to that effect, but at least they can play the leadership role and encourage the countries to do that? Or would you rather leave it up to the individual countries to make laws whether or not to accept that program or reject that program?
Can you repeat that question, please, for once?
Okay, so we agree that if your DNA comes up with linkage to an African country, you should have a pathway to that citizenship of that country. But the question is, would you rather those individual countries pass their own laws, in which case Ghana could say, look, if your DNA shows here, you can only choose me. If you choose me, you can't choose Nigeria or Sierra Leone or those other ones. But then Sierra Leone can say, hey, you can choose all three. We don't care. And then Nigeria can say, no, we don't accept that. So these are three different laws that can be read, right? Or would you rather the African Union lead that effort so that the law would be uniform across the continent?
Yeah, I think that would be great to have it uniform. And I know it's really difficult to get the African countries to agree on anything,
Mhm.
but to have a standard at the highest level, and then when it drops down to the country level, then they can determine whether they want to offer reparations, which might be separate from what is dictated by the African Union. African Union sets the bar of how we can reconnect to the continent, but each country can then dictate what reparations they may want to offer in order to incentivize us to, put our stake in that country as a joint citizen.
Okay. What about you, Daryl?
Gayla and I are so much alike because
Two alike?
yeah,
Are y'all
we've been
twins?
we've been knowing yes we've been knowing each other for so very long, for several decades, over 3 decades now. So our viewpoint, we've had these discussions so many times. So I'll take curtain two or curtain B, as Gayla mentioned, African Union being
Okay.
the ones who make that decision. And I
Okay.
also agree with her again on regarding the reparations.
Yeah, I was
So
going to go to that. Reparation, who pays? Is it the African countries or the slave the slave masters, the slave master countries?
No, the African countries, they traded us for amenities like wine and tobacco, and those are decisions that they made. Understanding that some of it was because they had won, through tribalism, had gone through some war, and then, but the thing is that, and without the colonial influence, we would have just integrated into that tribal group and not really been slaves that much longer. But what they did is they pushed us out. They sent us, to another land. I mean, I've read so many of those stories crossing, the Great Sea, as they called it, to a foreign place. But they made the decisions about who, would be enslaved, and then who were available to be exported by the colonizers. So I think that the reparations, in order to mend the wounds, that it needs to start there in earnest. It needs to be heartfelt, and it needs to be something that only they can do.
In what form would you like such a reparation, Daryl, if you agree?
uh, I believe that in a realistic way. You have to be realistic about the reparations, about what is possible and doing at the time. If it's in the way of natural resources or land, if that is what is available, then so be it. Uh, I believe that is but I do believe that both sides should pay reparations. I think because of what the limitations may be in some of the areas in which we come from, that we need to make. Okay, I said I believe that the reparations should be paid most realistic way of and seeing that may not be monetarily from the continent because it might be feasible, but they maybe have to be in the area of land. And then I think reparations should be paid on both sides, both the those who are here who they enslaved, the U.S. or the America or the Caribbeans, whichever, South America, whatever area, they should be paid in that manner financially. I think that should be through they were promised to do the trees, 40 acres and a mule, of course, didn't happen. So financially, let that happen. Then we can go back home, and then we can go back home and with the land, invest that money, that which we receive, into the land in our homeland in Africa.
Aren't you guys worried that when you introduce reparations into the mix, you run the risk of African countries saying that, you know what, forget citizenship, forget anything else? Are you worried about that?
No, I don't think so because I mean we got in this game of business of working with Africa was through trade first, and understanding that there is a deficit of knowledge, and experience and skills on the continent, or else you would be, you would look like the vibe. So we think that we have something to offer the continent, and that it's a give and take. You give us back what we would have gotten if our lives had not been interrupted, and we bring to you all that we gained because it was interrupted.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. If you look at how the just the United States was built, and the inventions and all the creations that designs. If you really look into it, that's the reason I don't want to tell you about critical race theory. If they don't, if you understand how we built this country, you'll see that coming back, we have so much to offer to our homeland because of that interest.
Okay.
I agree.
So, final question. I'm going to put two questions in one. Question one: what if the narrative of slave trade, and I'm asking this because I know history is written by the victor, right? What if the true narrative of the slave trade was that it was a case of captured prisoners of wars that were taken, and not a case of Africans voluntarily giving out their own? Would you feel the same way about the reparation? And the second part of the question is, and I can think that first question will go to whoever takes the first question, the other one takes the second question. And the second question is this: if I give you 100% as the reparation, and I say, give a percentage of what you expect from the African country and a percentage of what you should expect from those who uh, took the slaves, which would be your percentage proportion alignment?
What would be the percentage proportion alignment?
We can't hear you well.
What would be the percentage proportion? What would be the percentage portion alignment? If say that last part, I missed that part.
Okay, if you can position yourself well, so because we can have this is better. I said the second question is if a reparation that's due Darabella is $100, right?
Right.
How many of which would you expect to be paid by the Africans, and how many of it of that $100 would you expect to be paid by those who took you away?
That's an interesting question because
question.
yeah, because on that question, you can't exactly say 50-50 because, you know, I really don't think that the Africans that sold, those individuals that they had enslaved or that they had captured as spoils of war or whatever, I don't think they knew what was going to happen to them. They didn't have any idea of the rape and the meaning and the changing of the names and all of the things that were stripped away from us. I don't think they had a clue. And when I think maybe some of the stories started to come back, there was some level of regret that they may have encountered. So, but still, to think that our ancestors were sold out because of, gunpowder or alcohol or, fine linens, that's pretty painful.
Yeah, but that's the first part of the question. I'm saying that history is written by the victim. That's what we're told. But what if the true story is that it was a case of countries being defeated and prisoners of war taken forcibly outside, in which case it would negate the narrative that Africans willingly sold their own. You see what I'm saying?
Oh,
Right.
that was my question. When you said they were taken, they were taken because
POWs, that's what he's saying is that
Yes.
POWs
Yeah.
that basically all they did was they sold the POWs that they had. That's just like
Not
saying,
not necessarily. Some of the locals fought the colonizers when they came. I know the Ashantis, for example, had to fight the British 6 wars or so. And so there's still a school of thought that prisoners were captured in those wars, and those prisoners were taken away. That's one school of thought. Another school of thought is that tribal wars, one tribe fights the other, they capture prisoners of war, they don't really have prisons to keep them, and if you don't get rid of these prisoners, they could you maybe you tie them down or anything. If you don't find a way to get rid of them, they can come back to attack you while you're asleep. So if someone was willing to take them off your hands, well, you were happy to do that, right? And so there are all these kind of lingering stories out there. So I'm saying that what if the true narrative was that the true narrative is that it was a case of prisoners of war, in which case it will negate the narrative that Africans willingly sold their own. That's one question. And then the second question is about the percentage part.
okay, I can take the first part. The first part, I think that's why if they were captured, like you mentioned, and that is one of the narratives that is well is thought of that is well believed that they were captured, and that was the way in which and then they did have prisons, whatever. Or they didn't do prisons. It was maybe more on an honor system, a way of staying because you were captured, and then but they would come back and fight again. I can see that, but I think at that point, if that being the case, I still feel like in war, when in war, when some people have been it's been a situation where it is over. For example, the bombing of near Kawasaki, in the bombing in Japan. Like,
Talking about Hiroshima,
yeah,
Nagasaki.
in Nagasaki, yes. They restored that country. The money, dollars was restored because it was over the top. It was more than was expected. It wasn't nearly anything. It was so over the top that America felt we got to put money back into this country. These people lives were changed dramatically for centuries because of what we did. It's not going. It's not. It's not. It's so inhumane that it is beyond what
would consider for war. And that's what happened. It's like you have to restore them to some degree. And so that's what needed to be done. That's why I mentioned you got to be realistic. If it's land, then let it be land, and let the funds, the other portion, come from those who enslaved our ancestors. Don't let it be, because it's upside down. The percentage between America is black middle class person and a white middle class person. At the end of the year, the difference is $70,000 even today. So it's big, it's huge. It's more than what was expected, even if that is the case. So there has to be some restoration, even with that, because it's like an atomic bomb hit our family.
Okay. So Gail, what's your percentage?
Oh, after hearing that, I mean, I want to say 60-40, but I just don't feel like the colonizer would give up 60. We'd never get to 60. But it would have never happened if, the African countries that we came from had not given us up. We would have grown up with you on the continent. So it's a real quagmire here trying to figure out which way, if it was, it's close to. I don't think it's 50-50. I will say that. And it could be 60-40, and it could very well have gone either way.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I chime in?
Sure.
I because of what the
you need to come up a little bit. We don't see your lips. Go ahead.
I said because of what was done to our ancestors and what I know. I still, from the time they left the shores of Africa, I think more in the lines of 80-20, 70-30. What is owed to us by those who enslaved our ancestors, they should be the larger portion of paying back reparations.
And the 20 being the African.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because it was going on for hundreds of years, that type of tribal wars. But the inhumane conditions were never introduced until that chattel slavery was put in place.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank the both of you for this brief interaction. I think with DNT and Diaspora Weekly, we're constantly looking at way of interacting between people of African descent all over the world. And I want to thank you for making time to speak with DNT.
What's cool, fresh and trendy with a new look? Makes you feel real good, that refreshing vibe. Satisfies you right just the way you like. Do you know? Do you know? Do you know? Ain't gotta do it alone. Specialized makes you flow. Anytime, anywhere. Specialized, feel different. Always think specialized. Special ice, natural mineral water. Feel different. Think special. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the FDA.
I'm here with Casey Pride. What do I say? Big time brother, radio personality in ATL. And there's this talk about pathway to citizenship for Africans in the diaspora. And we also know that today you can do ancestry DNA to find out where you're linked to. So the ongoing discussion is that if you, for example, you do your ancestry DNA and it puts you in, say, Togo, Ethiopia, wherever, armed with that evidence, you should have a pathway to citizenship to that country. What's your take on that?
No, I think I seriously think it's a beautiful thing. The more that we can get connected with our roots, where we're from, be a part of those countries, be a part of those conversations. The black experience, especially here in the United States, has not been a great one. And being able to have a chance to go back to our roots, see where we're from, see all the beauty that Africa offers, see all the kings and queens and things that we come from, and that type of thing, I think is an invaluable experience, especially for a lot of people that have been born in these newer generations, like millennials and this type of stuff. You know, a little bit older folks, we understand the struggle, and we kind of know our history a little bit better. Some of us, it was on the tail end of having to live through a lot of that type of stuff. But it has always been promoted that, number one, that Africans don't like, Black Americans and this type of stuff. It's always been promoted to us that, everything over there is not modern like the United States is. And honestly, it's all a lie. And it's still the same headlines that we see to this day. So being able to have something like that, I think would be invaluable. I know I met with a lot of Ghanaians, I think it was a couple years ago, right after they did that call to come back to Ghana. And a lot of Black Americans decided to make that move. And I mean, just to hear their experiences being over there, being in a place that racism doesn't exist, being in a place where everyone looks like you and this type of stuff, and the support and the love that they talked about in those interviews that I done with them. I mean, I think that's something every Black person should experience, because I think we would do a lot better in this country, having a lot more pride in ourselves and having a lot more pride in where we come from and what we've been disconnected from.
Okay, so in that vein, if you're in love with, and one person in particular, Samuel Jackson, he came to Ghana. Of course, he loved Ghana and everything, but his DNA put him somewhere in Gabon or Angola, somewhere thereabouts.
Gabon.
Was it Gabon, right? Okay. So if you fall in love with one country and it turns out that your DNA is actually a different country, would that be disappointing?
I don't think so. I think it would just make me curious to find out more and visit and travel, further and find out, where does my people come from?
Okay.
I don't think it's something that it would be looked down upon or something like that. I know a lot of folks have fallen in love with Ghana and a lot of places in South Africa and this type of stuff, like Johannesburg and, others. But I think everyone would be willing to want to explore exactly where they come from, what the land looks like, what the people are like, what the culture is like in those areas. I know I would love to. Egypt is the place I'm planning on traveling to see one day in my life. Because it's just something that I got into a lot of that history and that type of stuff. And I was just so floored by so much knowledge that originally originated from that area, and wanting to go see it for myself.
Have you done your DNA?
Not yet. It's definitely something. It's funny, when I was younger, I was against it. But now that I'm getting older and this type of stuff, family is really one of the most important things to me. So now I'm really starting to wonder a lot more where I come from, what I'm made of, what my makeup is, and this type of thing.
So in this vein, are you going to wait until you find out where you're from before you fall in love with any African country?
I promise you, as soon as I can, I am going to start traveling over there to really see a lot of the country. I've started to see, so much stuff come out of the region now, seeing about so many different places like Malawi and so many others I met people from, even meeting people from Egypt, meeting people from Ethiopia, Nigeria. I mean, it's something that I've truly grown an interest in. Okay. And definitely want to explore the continent.
The other question too is usually when you do this ancestry DNA, it doesn't place you in one country. It gives you like 3 strong ones where your roots are from. And then so the question has now become, when that happens, should we give you access? Should you have access to all those countries, or should you be limited to one that you prefer?
I don't think you should be limited to one at all. I think you should have full access to the entire continent, to be honest with you.
To get citizenship from all those countries?
Oh yeah. I hope I ain't that spread out, but no, I definitely think just seeing the entire African experience,
Okay.
seeing where we come from, I think it is a definitely a beautiful thing, and it's a needed thing amongst Black people, because we've always been a beat down culture in the country of the United States, and it's always been kind of hard for Black folks to hold their head high. I'm wonderful to see the new generation, so many college graduates, so many doctors, so many lawyers, and a lot of us is doing well. But it's definitely a new thing in the United States versus a traditional thing, because we've always kind of been put down. We still hold the lowest stats in a lot of different categories, from health to education. So, I think having that experience helps that pride in self, helps that self-esteem in a lot of Black folks, and it would definitely benefit us to see where we're from.
But the African will say, how come I get to go to a restaurant with you? You get to eat from the buffet line, and I'm stuck with just one plate, one meal.
Some of us get to eat at the buffet. No, I definitely think it's rough in this country, especially for people immigrating here. It's very expensive to live. We have high inflation rates. And it's our news is manipulated. It's so many different things that go on here. It's hard for all cultures to come to this country, especially to come be successful and truly make it. But anyone that's determined that can come here and really make a living in this type of stuff, I would love to see that same thing coming from our homeland.
Okay, well, that's something that I can tell you we're really pushing. I mean, some of us are really bought into it. I mean, from the African perspective, right? From the citizens' perspective, I've heard people say, well, geez, the resources here are barely enough for all of us. Now you're going to bring all these people. But you and I also know that even when that pathway exists, it's not everybody that's going to jump all over it. More likely than not, it will be those who are bringing to the table rather than coming to take from the table. What's your take on that?
No, I definitely think, because we're already starting to see that, with people from the United States, we bring technology, we bring information, we bring new ways of doing things and stuff like that. You've seen a lot of the people that become stars and gotten rich, people like Akon, they go and lay out, electric grids and things like that, bringing more internet opportunities, just bringing a lot more resources to the table. And Africa has the natural resources, and we can bring that intellectual and technical resources and combine the two to help each other.
Well, and then lastly, the issue of reparation was thrown on the table. There are those who believe that the reparation argument should not be targeted at only those who enslaved our ancestors, but those from the continent who gave our ancestors away. Where do you stand on that argument?
My entire life, and I am from Montgomery, Alabama, I've heard this statement: I have 40 acres and a mule.
Mm-hmm.
And they keep the mule, but give me my 40 acres.
Okay.
But I don't think reparations will ever happen in this country, to be honest with you. I think it is due, because at the time when we were enslaved and building this country, they were just giving away resources, giving away agriculture, giving away technology, and helped a lot of these people that now are billionaires and becoming trillionaires and stuff like that. It was given to these people, whereas we did the labor, we did the work, and I think it's deserving of us to get it. I don't really think it would happen. As far as the people, I feel like this: all people at fault should contribute to that, whether it's African kings or villages that helped sell us into slavery, or the people that enslaved us. I think we kind of all owe from that. It becomes a part of, all right, who gets it in this type of stuff, because I mean, we're far removed from slavery now, and trying to prove, all right, this family was enslaved, this family was enslaved. But I definitely think it's owed to everyone that had to experience that. Even the Native Americans here, look at what they've done for them. I mean, they've got their own parts of land, they got their own country inside of a country, and this type of stuff. They were enslaved just like us, but we didn't get a chance to get any of that. it was us that had to take on the terror, the horror, our families being split apart, and this type of thing, with nothing to show for it other than, matter of fact, it's nothing to show for it other than freedom, which was difficult enough as is. Because even after we became free, then came the terrorism and everything that happened after that through racism. So I would say personally myself, I would like to see both sides contribute to that.
Okay. And in a 100 in a percentage format, where would you put the responsibility? What portion?
In any transaction, both sides are equally in that transaction 50-50. Somebody has to be the seller, somebody has to be the buyer. Okay. And when you are doing something and you know you're wrong doing it, I think both people are equally they're equally guilty, and both of them should equally share that.
But which of these narratives do you believe, though, that there's the written narrative is that African people just willingly sold their own to the slaves, and then there's an emerging narrative that there were wars and prisoners of war were captured, and those were the ones sent away. Which of those narratives do you believe?
I would say this. When you really go back looking at history, slavery is nothing new. And every culture has had some form of slavery. I don't think even the people that may or may not have sold us, or whether we were sent as prisoners, I don't think they actually knew what they were selling their people into. American slavery was the worst thing that ever happened. Much worse than what you saw in the Bible, much worse than what you saw anywhere else. Everywhere else, it was more like serving out a punishment or indentured servitude. Here we are actually property like dogs and cats. So I don't think a lot of that, I'm not sure exactly, because I hadn't seen that history and I hadn't seen any facts on that. But I would definitely say more than likely they probably didn't know what they were putting their people into. Didn't have any idea of how many would be killed, separated, tortured, raped. I mean, it was a horrible experience like no one has ever seen.
So in that case, they are due some reparations as well.
As far as that one, I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. On that note, we'll end that here. And I would like to thank you, Casey Pride. You have an amazing radio show in ATL. And you're definitely providing us with some very good insight. So
thank you.
Thank you so much.